Recovering from lower back pain without this one tool is next to impossible, as you'll always be stuck with a vulnerable lower back, wondering when it's going to go next. But that doesn't need to be the case. If you incorporate strengthening or resistance training into your rehabilitation, you'll find you can overcome the barriers. So no matter whether it's a minor disc strain or a severe disc herniation or some other diagnosis that's giving you back pain or sciatica, you will have success, but you've got to do it right. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Michael Fatika, the lead osteopath and spine specialist here at Back in Shape. We help people around the UK and all over the world fix their back pain and get back in shape for the long term. And in today's podcast, we're going to cover this invaluable tool to make sure you're doing it safely, you're actually being effective, and so that you can get results and get free from pain again. Before we get into some of the mistakes that you might have made in the past with your rehab, it's important to understand why we're here. Most of us, as soon as we get into our maybe late 20s, early 30s, our work-life balance, our demands for maybe children, having a family, all start to get in the way of us being able to look after ourselves. So by the time we reach our 40s and maybe 50s, we've spent maybe 20 or 30 years not really rebuilding this structure and supporting our body effectively. So we've got some major areas for improvement if we do have back pain as we get into our 40s and 50s. Things that we need to fix if we're going to actually recover from this in the long term. Of the literally thousands of members that we've seen in the program and patients we've seen in clinic over the years, the overwhelming majority that have back pain for longer than a couple of months that's not resolving or coming and going, they're lacking one fundamental foundation, which is this strength. They're just not strong enough or competent in some basic movements. So fixing this is going to make a massive difference, but you've got to avoid some of the common mistakes, and there are two big ones. The first one is the person that comes in, they're doing some bridges, let's say. Now bridges, glute bridges can be great. Many people will be told, perhaps yourself, that you've got weak glutes and that's why your back's not there. And there's reasons for that, and we cover that in other videos. And there's a dedicated tutorial video on how to do glute bridges in the right way, link down in the description. But the simple fact of the matter is you may be being given a sheet from the NHS or from your doctor, do these bridges, 10 reps, you do them twice a day or once a day. You do them for, I don't know how long, maybe you just keep doing them. And then 6 months go by and you're still doing those same bridges. You haven't actually strengthened. You're being ineffective with this because you don't know any better and you haven't been given the right guidance. But doing the same exercises, for example, 10 glute bridges, when you can comfortably do 10, 15 or 20 squats, means that the glute bridges aren't actually strengthening you because you're not operating within the way in which strengthening must be done. It's like trying to bake a cake. If you just throw all the ingredients and put it in the fridge, as opposed to putting it in the oven first or putting them in the right order, you're not going to make the right cake. You have to hit certain markers when we're doing strength training to make it effective so that the outcome happens. Simply doing exercises like walking, like the glute bridges we just mentioned, or like going swimming, those do not build strength, but it's such a massive misconception that so many people have. Again, another example or anecdote. Some people say, well, I've been walking for the last 20 years to keep myself healthy, keep my legs strong, keep my back strong. It doesn't work like that. If you're walking for leisure, for enjoyment, you're not making yourself stronger. You're maintaining the baseline ability to walk, which is not the same as building strength in your lower back. Once you come to this realization, you can start to move forwards. That brings me to the second big mistake, which is not focusing on correct technique first. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of you will obsess about perfection on the technique, and there does need to be an element of moving forwards rather than analysis paralysis. You've got to get the foundational element right so that you can perform an exercise with correct technique and then find the right level with which to do that exercise intensity-wise to get a strengthening outcome. So for example, you might think, oh no, Mike said that squats are really good for building strength in the back, which they are when done correctly. But if you're doing squats rounding your lower back because you've got no control of the lower lumbar spine, you're going to really be making that L4-5 disc bulge a lot worse. You're going to be putting compression through the front part of the disc, stretching the back fibers, and not practicing the exercise with good foundational technique. So you're going to be making mistakes and making things worse. Now, if you've tried squats, maybe they haven't worked for you in the past. The simple fact of the matter is they work. It's whether you made them work or not. And that's why we've got a full video tutorial on how to do squats safely and effectively with breakdowns and build-ups. You can check that again out in the link in the description after this video too. So when it comes to effectively strengthening for your lower back, we've got a 4-layered approach, keeping with that cake theme. And these are layers because you have to add them together. You don't move from layer 1 onto layer 2 and stop doing layer 1. It needs to be present in the whole thing to make the strengthening process effective. So layer 1 is the foundation. It's getting your technique right, making sure that you are doing whatever exercise is being done. Maybe it's a glute bridge, maybe it's a squat, maybe it's a hip hinge. You're doing that with correct technical form, not making mistakes with the knees, with the legs, with the hips, with the back. You're doing it properly. Then we layer on the desired intensity, which is layer 2. that means you're actually using the right sort of level of intensity. So if, for example, you could do 10 squats, and if someone stood next to you, maybe I was stood next to you right now, and I'm like, do another 10, you could do another 10. You haven't been working out at the desired intensity. So maybe you need to increase the weight. Maybe you need to use resistance bands. Maybe you can use a weighted vest. You could do any number of these things. Maybe you could, in the case of a squat, go a little bit lower through the squat whilst observing still that layer 1, which is good technique. The next thing is really important, and that's layer 3, which I'll touch on a little bit more in a moment. But you have to get the appropriate rest and nutrition on board. Building strength is like building a house. If you don't bring the right bricks to the development site, you're not going to build anything. And that happens after you've given instructions. Your workout is giving instructions for your body to then build a house. If you don't deliver the right nutrition and give it the right amount of time, you're not going to build anything. So your recovery nutrition needs to be on point. And we cover this, for example, the need for protein to build muscle tissue and recover, in separate podcasts as well, linked down in the description. Layer 4, the final layer, which wraps up the cake. You could consider it the icing on the cake. This is about consistency over time. You must apply these layers consistently, the technique, the actual desired intensity, and then recovering effectively from your workouts over a period of time in order to get results. I'll draw out one big confusion point that people make when it comes to exercising to make improvement. So everybody knows you need to improve your flexibility, because having good flexibility in the hips is going to help take strain off your lower back, right? But when you do a stretch, you get an instant improvement. You start the stretching exercise and you have less hip mobility. Let's say it's a hamstring stretch, simple hamstring stretch. And then you finish the stretch 30 seconds later, or maybe you've done a couple of things like in the unlocking hamstrings video, which took about 5 minutes, link down in the description. And you finish the actual activity and you are more flexible. So the number one parameter that you're measuring, which is the flexibility, improves in a matter of minutes, maybe even seconds. Right? With strengthening, it doesn't work like that. You actually, arguably, if you're working out at the desired intensity and you're pushing yourself properly, with good technique, of course, then when you start your workout, you are going to be stronger and have better performance than when you finish your workout, because you will be fatigued. You will have challenged those muscles sufficiently to mean that you can do less. So strengthening is a bit different. Sometimes people say, oh, well, I've started strengthening exercises and I didn't feel better after doing them. Of course not. It doesn't work like that. You've got to make sure you don't feel worse from a point of view of you're injuring yourself, which is why technique is important. But understand that repeatedly doing strengthening exercises gives you a reward over weeks and months, not minutes and hours. It's very important that you understand this so that you don't have false expectations around strengthening. You're talking about building your body up. That happens outside of the workout, whereas stretching it and improving mobility happens within the stretch itself. This is an important paradigm to understand so you can move forward, understanding what you're doing and how it works. So now you've got those 4 layers and a better understanding of strength versus flexibility. You want to understand the one foundational part of strength that you've got to get right if you have a lower back injury, and that is spinal control. This is the ability to provide isometric strength, stability, stabilizing strength to your spine so that when you're doing certain activities or even the exercises, the strengthening exercises, your spine isn't moving all over the place. You have to develop the ability to engage the core set of musculature around your spine. This can be done really effectively with a simple dead bug exercise. We talk about this again in a full tutorial, which you can go check out after this video. But the dead bug exercise is a great one, the way we modify it, because what you're having to do is provide isometric, stabilizing strength to your spine. And then you're safely wiggling one leg. You do this on the floor or on the bed, it doesn't really matter. The floor is obviously better, but if you can't get down on the floor, do it on the bed. And then all you're doing is wiggling one leg. Now, I use the term wiggling in a bit of a tongue-in-cheek way. If you can't even wiggle your one leg and stabilize your spine, it's humbling. You need to work on that. You need to improve that. But once you can actually do that exercise correctly with proper form and stabilize your spine, you then have the foundation so we can start actually building strength to the spine. So this brings us to, in our opinion, the 3 best exercises to build strength in your spine. And it doesn't matter what condition you've got, what diagnosis you've got, whether you've had surgery or not. This works in all of those cases because we've got members and patients over the years that prove it. The reason we choose these 3 specific exercises is because they actually replicate activities of daily living. You're not using machines because that's not real. You don't get an instant benefit from using the machine, but you do get an instant benefit from an activity that replicates getting out of a chair, which you will do many times a day. You do get an instant benefit from replicating an activity like brushing your teeth, which again, you do many times a day, either brushing your teeth or you're maybe preparing some food over the sink or maybe doing some ironing or other activities. Maybe you're just stood up at your desk and you're looking down at your papers, you're doing this movement again. And then finally, going up and down steps. If you're out at the shops, you're going to go up and down a step. At some point, you might live in a house, and therefore you have a set of stairs. Learning to do these 3 movements, replicate those activities. So even as you make technical improvement in a relatively short period of time, you haven't made strengthening improvement yet, you're going to benefit from being more competent in your everyday life, and therefore decreasing the chance of flare-ups and relapses. So to explain these exercises in a little more detail, we've obviously got the getting out of the chair as a squat, right? What does a squat do? A squat is providing trunk stability, so that's that core engagement, maintaining a neutral spine. Then we're having to move the hips, knees, and ankles at the same time whilst balancing in space. This is such an important skill, and we can obviously scale each one of these from no weight with support all the way to using significant weight as well. Second one is a hip hinge. Here again, spine stability, protecting the spine, holding it steady, whilst we then move the hips only into a flexion position. That's just the hips moving. The knees stay stable. The ankles stay relatively stable as well. And we're just focusing on moving through that hip hinge motion, bending at the hips, generating power from the hips whilst maintaining a neutral spine. The final one being the split squat, the step up, the reverse lunge. We're going to take the step up as a great example here, but they're all fundamentally the same. And that is, again, doing the same squat, providing spine stability, but now we have one leg driving, generating power. And therefore we need to correctly integrate that spine with the one driving leg, bending at the hips, the knees, and the ankle, whilst maintaining balance to really hone this skill and build our strength and ability to do it. No matter what your current level of ability, those 3 skills are vital. You need to master the spine stabilization first, which can be done safely and played around with on a bed or on the floor. But even if you are struggling to do even that, know that you are doing these activities on a daily basis that I've mentioned. Getting out of chairs, going upstairs, getting in and out of the car, washing your face or brushing your teeth. You're doing the hip hinge, the squat, and the step up every single day. And the great thing about them is they're accessible to absolutely everyone. Whether you're in the surgeon's office getting out of his chair or her chair, or whether you're at home getting out of the toilet seat, you're going to be doing these movements. So the sooner you master them, the better. And you might start off there, struggling to do those activities, but then building strength over the long term in the spine, the bones of the spine, the bones of your hips, the discs, the ligaments that support it, and then of course the muscles around there. You can make real results, and you can scale this to using resistance bands. Then you can use maybe some kettlebells or dumbbells and build that up to using barbells for some of these exercises to really scale the rate with the weights that you're using, build the resistance, and ultimately build your strength. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what age you are and what condition you have. Your spine has to live in the real world. And unless you're going to say, I'm never going to do these things ever again, then you need to have more strength. And you might be put off because of things that you've tried in the past and they haven't worked. But if you do those 4 layers, make sure that you're competent with your technique, and maybe you get a little bit of support to do this, you really will be able to rebuild the strength in your spine. As I said, strengthening doesn't happen overnight. It requires a concerted effort over a long period of time. And know that you're going to have to revisit your technique every so often to make sure that as you revisit your intensity and you put the weights up or the resistance up, you might become a little bit wobbly with your technique again. So you need to dial those in. You're constantly evaluating these processes. But the better you get at it, the more effective you will be. And therefore, the stronger your back will get over the long term. Whether it's a disc herniation or whether it's post-spinal surgery, you will rebuild the strength in your body. And that will move you away from this position of vulnerability and massively reduce the risk of future episodes of back pain and future injury. Ultimately, you cannot recover from back pain or any sort of injury that's giving you back pain or sciatica if you do not incorporate resistance training. Life has resistance, and there is a safe way to be able to build up that resilience in your back. It takes a little bit of time, but you can do it. Whatever your diagnosis, whatever your condition, whatever your age, you 100% can be stronger than you are today. It just requires a little bit of effort and a little bit of education and a little bit of time. If you do need any extra help with any of the movements that we've mentioned, we've got full in-depth tutorials across the website and in the YouTube channel as well to help you with some of these basic movements. We've got the free Fixing Back Pain Masterclass to start to cover some of these concepts, which again is on the website and on the YouTube channel. And of course, if you need any more help and you want a full structured approach to these things with support from us here at the clinic and at the program, then you can always have a look at the Back in Shape membership, which has been tried and tested by thousands of people already. And it's something that we use with all of the patients here in the clinic too. If you've made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. I do hope it's been helpful. Consider sharing this with someone else who's been struggling, and hopefully it will help them too think about the prospects of recovering from back pain with a new confidence and a new optimism. As always, thanks for watching us this far, and we'll see you in the next video.